Hey everyone, I'm Kim, the mom boss behind Emery and Kay, and today I'm coming at you with another spooky season tutorial. So this one is actually inspired semi by an ad that I saw on my Facebook feed and kind of by a tutorial that Sandy from Sandy's Organized Chaos did a couple of years ago. So I'll go ahead and put a picture of it on the screen now for you to see. So the ad I saw on my Facebook was like a kid's baking kit, and they were cupcakes and they had green frosting and little candy eyeballs in them, and I thought, well, those are really cute. And I thought, I wonder if I could put this on a tumbler. So I went to Amazon, looked for like fake eyeballs, and those things are so expensive. Why are they so expensive? So I thought, no, that's not cost effective to put on a tumbler. Then I thought, I wonder if I could use actual candy eyeballs. So I went to Walmart and I got candy eyeballs. Actually, the candy eyeballs were some little round candies. Some of them were sugar, some were chocolate. And I remembered the tutorial that Sandy from Sandy's Organized Chaos did a couple years ago, her witch's brew one. I'm sure you guys have seen that everywhere. She used the half pearls. Now, I tried that method after that tutorial came out, and I was so bad at it. It was horrible at it. I tried it a few times. I'm like, I'm giving up. I can't do it. And so this time I thought, I'm gonna get these little tiny candy beads and I'm gonna try it again, but a little bit different, use a little bit less. And I love how this tumbler came out. It is so cute. It's perfect for Halloween coming up, or if you have a lot of customers like me who just love spooky season all year round. So as always, I will link and list everything I use in the description box below. I'll also have a few discount codes if you want to save on some of the goods. I think that's that. Let's get to it.
Alright, as always, we're going to start with our fully prepped and painted cup. I'm using a wine tumbler. I actually get my wine tumblers from Amazon. I have been using this brand for a few years and I really like it, and they're cheap. I don't charge my customers too much for wine tumblers, so I like to buy ones that are affordable. So I've sanded my cup, washed it, and painted it with black spray paint. I used Rust-Oleum, I think flat black or semi-gloss, but whatever you have for black spray paint. And now I'm going to put on my epoxy, and we're going to apply chunky glitter. And I'm showing you guys me putting on the epoxy so you can see how much I use. I use typically what I would do in a regular coat of epoxy when I'm applying chunky glitter, if that makes sense. I do this because it helps my chunky lay super flat. I can usually do one coat of epoxy over it and I don't have to sand, and I can move right onto decals. So we're going to be using Vacation. This is from the Glitter Guy. It is one of their hacked glitters. So it is not opaque, it's translucent. So the black base is going to give it this really awesome like purple green. It really helps kind of pull those deep colors out of the glitter. So you can see I am sprinkling my chunky glitter on with my fingers. I never, ever dump it from the bottle onto my cup. You always sprinkle it with your fingers. This allows you to control the coverage, and it allows you to have a light enough coverage so that your chunky glitter isn't sticking up everywhere, but a full enough coverage so that you don't have a bunch of spaces in between your glitter. Just trust me, if you've never applied your chunky glitter this way, you have to. It is a game changer. Like I said, one coat of epoxy and this baby will be good to go. So I'm going to put it back on the spinner. I'm going to let it cure. I'll do a coat of my Rust-Oleum clear gloss, and then I'll go in with a coat of epoxy, and this cup will be ready to go. I don't use freezer paper, none of that. Just trust me here. It's a game changer. So once our epoxy over our chunky glitter has cured, we're going to do some fun 3D drips on our tumbler. And I have just a little bit of epoxy in this cup, maybe a tablespoon or so. You really don't need a lot. Now there are a few different ways you can thicken your epoxy for drips. You can babysit your epoxy and wait like 45 minutes to an hour for it to get nice and thick. I personally despise doing that because it is a waste of time, and I don't like to do it. I did so many drip cups when I first did them a few years ago that way, and it was a nightmare. The other way, Counterculture has like a powder that you can add to your epoxy. I've used that before. It works well. Make sure you use a respirator when you wear it, though, because it goes everywhere in the air, and it is like basically ground up fiberglass. So protect your lungs. Or you can use this, which is just cornstarch from my kitchen. So I put it in a glass dish and brought it down to my basement, and here we are. So you can see I'm just adding a little bit at a time, maybe like half a teaspoon or so at a time, and just mix it in really well. So the thickness that I'm going for with my epoxy for my drips is almost like a toothpaste. I want it just a little bit looser than a toothpaste. If you've never done drips before, I highly recommend practicing on like an extra plastic cup or whatever. Don't go straight onto your project if you've never done drips before. Make sure you get a little bit of practice in. As far as getting your thickness right on your epoxy, that takes some practice too. If it's a little bit too thin, your drips will just be longer. If it's a little bit thick, you'll have to heat it up. It really won't be the end of the world either way. So as I'm doing this, I like to kind of scrape my popsicle stick on the edge of my cup, and that kind of allows me to see how quickly it's dripping down the inside of the cup, so I can determine if I need more of my cornstarch or if I'm good. But just make sure you're not adding too much at a time, because obviously if you add too much, you can't go back. You're kind of stuck with what you got. So keep going until you get that kind of wet toothpaste-y type texture. And then once you get that, we're going to move on to our next step, which is adding our color. So I'm going to be using some Micas in this to give it a super pretty bright green color. So I'm still going in here. This part really, in reality, doesn't take very long. It takes a few minutes, which is nice, as opposed to babysitting it. That takes forever. So it's looking good. There you go. It's going down the side of the cup nice and slow. We're ready to move on to color. So I'm going to be using Micas. I'm using apple green and fluorescent green. These are both from the Glitter Guy. The fluorescent is I guess a matte, you would call it, and the apple green has a little shimmer to it. So I'm just going to kind of add a little bit of these at a time. You don't need a lot of Micas. If you've never worked with Mica before, you literally need like a pinch, and you're good to go. As long as you're using a good quality Mica, you really need like none in there. So I'm going to go ahead and mix my Micas in really well. I'm going to make sure that I like this color. I might want to add a little bit of one color or a little more of the other color. I'm going to go in with a little bit more of the apple green. So just play around with it until you get a color that you're happy with. Oh, I'm going to add a little fluorescent green too. Look at that. I'm going to add a little more of both. So once you get the color that you like, I'll show you guys how to put it onto your cup. Now there's definitely a lot of ways that you can do drips on your cup. This is just what I do. It's what works best for me. If you do drips and you have a method that works for you, go ahead and stick to it. There are so many different ways to do drips, but this is just what works best for me. So I am left-handed, so I like to have my cup when I'm doing my drips spinning to the left. As you can see, I'm holding my cup really pretty flat, not really at an angle, and I prefer to use a popsicle stick to kind of guide my epoxy out. And as I'm doing this, I'm not super concerned about the line being straight or the thickness of it being the same all the way around. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to go back through with my popsicle stick, and I'm just going to gently pull up that like rim of epoxy to the top rim of my tumbler. And this just helps to ensure that I don't have any like weird gaps where my drips aren't touching the top of my cup. So I just want to make sure I get that pulled all the way up to the top. And then I prefer to just fill in these little spaces here. And then I'll just use my popsicle stick and I'll kind of add in a little bit more where I might want it to be a little bit thicker. Now you really don't need a lot of epoxy to do your drips. If you put too much on there, your drips will be super thick and you don't want that. So if you have any bare spots, add a little bit more, but less is more when it comes to doing drips. And so now I'm just going to set my cup on my table, and I prefer to just let my epoxy do its thing. Occasionally, if there's a spot where I'm like, ooh, it'd be really pretty to have a drip here or there, I'll go in with a popsicle stick and pull it down a little bit. Or if I notice kind of a little bare spot, I'll add a little bit more epoxy. But other than that, I really like the look of the epoxy just doing its own thing. So I'm just kind of spinning my cup around. I always put it flat on the table so my drips go straight down my cup and they don't kind of go off to the side and get all funky and wonky. I don't have to tip my cup, upside down. If my epoxy were too thin, I might have to play with it a little bit more, but this is on point. If it was too thick, you could use a little bit of heat. So if your epoxy isn't quite where you would have liked it to be, there are definitely ways that you can still make it work. So don't worry about that. Once I get my drips to where I like them, I'm going to go ahead and put my cup back on the turner. Now at this point, if I weren't adding fun little embellishments to my drips, I would just let it turn and fully cure for about 4 hours, and then I would move on to the next step. You'd be good to go. But as promised, we're going to spice up our drips a little bit. Here I'm just showing you how much epoxy I have left. Like I said, less is more when it comes to drips. So we're going to be using candy actually on these. Sugar pearls. These chocolatey pearls actually ended up being too big, so I did not use them, and candy eyeballs. All of this stuff literally came from the cake aisle at Walmart. So I'm going to use a little wax tip tool, I guess. This is what I use when I rhinestone cups. And you just kind of gently press it onto the eyeball. And then I'm going to place them onto my drips where I want them. Now this part, you just kind of want to look and see where you want them. There's really, I don't have a reason to why I'm putting them where I am. I just thought that they looked good where they were. So just decide how many you want to do. I did 4 because I like even numbers. And then I'm going to take my finger, which the camera cut out for some reason, and just gently press them into your epoxy. Now I'm going to use my gloved hand, and I'm going to take some of those little sugar pearls and place those around my cup. Now these, if you wanted your drips to be super bubbly, you could definitely add more. I just added a few here and there because that's what I liked, but this part is totally up to you. Add as many eyeballs and as many little pearls as you want to. Once you're happy with your little eyeballs and your pearls, you're going to go ahead and let it fully cure. You're going to give it 2 really good coats of your Rust-Oleum clear gloss. That is vital to do, or the black in your eyeballs will run. Then you're going to put a thin coat of epoxy on, and now we're going to use some alcohol ink on our drips to make them look 3D and almost like they're kind of bubbling and flowing. So the first color is this light green. It's called Agave, and I just put a few drips into this plastic cup, and I'm using a popsicle stick that I broke in half to just smear them onto my drips. I don't have a rhyme or reason as to why I'm doing this. I know that I want some of my ink to be on my little candy pearls. I also know that I don't want it to be on my little eyeballs. But don't worry if you get a little bit onto your eyeballs. Once we're finished with this step, you can go back through with a gloved finger and just carefully wipe off the white, and you'll never even know it was there. If it gets onto your glitter at all, you won't even see it. So don't be concerned about that. So I'm just kind of going in and just kind of basically scraping my popsicle stick on my drips to get this color just plopped on there. Don't overthink this. Just get that alcohol ink on there. I promise it's going to look amazing. So once you've got some of that lighter green on there, we're going to go in with a darker green. So the darker green I'm using is called Jungle, and I don't know why I showed it twice, but there you go. And I'm going to repeat the process with the darker green, the same thing I did with the lighter green. I'm going to drip it into a cup and then use my popsicle stick to kind of start to swirl it and smear it around on there. And I'm kind of mixing it with that lighter green. I want to make sure I get up at that top rim. Don't forget that part. Get the bottom of your drips and your little pearls if you want to. Again, like I said, if you get it on the eyeballs, don't worry. You can wipe that off with a gloved finger, no problem. So just going in with this darker green and starting to build some dimension. And I will go back in and add a little bit more light and a little more dark and just swirl them. Just play around with this until you get something that you like. My biggest tip with this is just to remember, once you get to a point where you're like, ooh, that looks good, walk away. Because if you're like me, you think, oh, that looks good, I bet I can make it look better, and then you end up messing it up. So just allow yourself to have some fun with this part. Once you get your inks on there and you're happy with how they look, go ahead and let it cure. I decided not to do a decal on this cup. I really liked how it looked. I really liked the focus just being on the drips and the little bubble pearls and the little eyeballs. So I actually just gave it a good sand after this ink layer cured. I did 2 more coats of epoxy and my cup was finished. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful and maybe a little bit inspirational. If you like our tutorials, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I do plan to continue to upload a new tutorial every single Friday. If you enjoyed this video, I would love if you gave it a thumbs up or left a comment down below. Thank you again so much for watching, and until next time, happy crafting.